Hello everyone, I'm at the Arctic360 annual conference and it's our third day of meeting and great discussions and really informative sessions. I'm here for a quick chat with the Honorable David Collenette. Welcome to the Arctic360 conference. It's so great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. For people who don't remember me in politics, I've been around a long time and was elected under Pierre Trudeau and was in his last cabinet, and then was in private life for a number of years and came back with Jean Chrétien in 1993. And I was Minister of National Defense for 3 years and then Minister of Transport for 7 years before I retired in 2004. So what I did in government gives me a good feel for some of the issues that have been discussed here today. And currently I'm chair of the NATO Association of Canada, and of course the security dimension that is going on in the Ukrainian war in Europe is spilling over, obviously, to the Arctic. I think it's fitting that I can take a part in this conference.
Yes, it was so great to listen to you on this session this morning, which we'll get into in a second. What role does NATO play in infrastructure in the Arctic?
Well, NATO itself it deals with the North Atlantic defense, and so the focus has been more on Europe and the North Atlantic. So NATO doesn't have a formal role in the Arctic,
right,
but a number of NATO countries like Norway and Denmark, obviously Canada, the United States, are there because our countries border the Arctic. NORAD, which is a bilateral organization established in the late 1950s by the United States and Canada for the air defense of North America, is separate from NATO, but of course it's two NATO members that are looking after their own territory. I think there's going to be more and more of an overlap in terms of interest. Where does the North Atlantic end and where do the Arctic waters begin? And given you're talking about North America with its the same kind of membership to some degree, there will perhaps be some NATO involvement. But then countries that even now they're members of NATO and they're doing their part, but they're somewhat more independent, like I'm thinking of Hungary and Turkey, right, would not be interested in NATO having a formal role in the Arctic. So the answer to your question is I don't see NATO itself in being involved in Arctic infrastructure, but NATO countries, like the ones I mentioned, including Canada and the United States, obviously have a stake in the Arctic and Arctic infrastructure.
Absolutely, and we spoke a little bit about that on the panel you were on. You were joined on the panel with a cross section of companies and also government. We had Davie Shipbuilding, we had Pentagon, we had a few others, and it was the title for the session was Multi-Use, Multi-Purpose Critical Infrastructure. What were your takeaways from that session?
Well, I think it's a general.
Great session.
Well, I thought it was okay. I thought that there was a real synergy and an agreement among the players as to what is needed. And we talk about infrastructure. Look, there's what I call social infrastructure. There's dealing with the health, the schooling, housing as it affects Indigenous people. But the focus for me is on transportation and security.
Yes.
And on transportation, if the polar ice is melting, which it is, and it's going to make the Canadian part of the Arctic more accessible, then we have to have a presence there, and we have to have deep water ports. We're building Arctic patrol vessels, we're building new icebreakers, and if the Arctic route is going to be one that is going to be used for transit of cargo, we have to make sure that we have the ability to make sure that that is secure, that our interests are looked after, and you've got to resupply those communities in the north and those facilities. And then, of course, the Canadian Arctic is one of the world's last and great repositories of mineral wealth,
Yes.
of rare earth metals, things that are in great demand around the world and will continue to be in great demand. And so there is a need to exploit those resources. Obviously, it has to be done in a sensitive way. We don't want environmental damage. We want to make sure that it is within the value system of our Indigenous peoples. So all of that really, came together in our panel. And so whether it was my conservative friend, MP, who was with us, or whether it was the business leaders, we all sort of were singing from the same page. And I think one thing that came out of it is that dealing with the Arctic is not a partisan issue.
That's great.
It's an issue of national self-interest and security. And in the same way, what is happening in Ukraine and Canada's response is a non-partisan issue. You don't see debate in the House of Commons because people know this transcends politics. Arctic development and Arctic security, in my view, transcends politics.
I love that. That's really a great way to put it. Absolutely. So, do you think there's a greater sense of urgency in the current state?
There's urgency because of global warming.
Yeah.
There's urgency because of the security dimension that's unfolding, and the pretension of other actors to in effect exploit. And my exploit is an odd word, but to make use of the Arctic as it becomes more accessible. And not all of those actors are actors that I have concern about. For example, we had the Japanese ambassador, the Korean ambassador here, and those are our allies. We had obviously other NATO countries that bordered Norway and Denmark. Their ambassadors were here. Iceland's ambassador was here. So I don't worry about them. But I do worry about others, the Russians, the Chinese, and others that in effect would want to almost spread their wings and undermine our integrity, the security of Canada and the United States, which is our next door neighbor in Alaska.
Describe for me the value of this conference.
I think any publication, any conference, any example of where people come together in a positive way to try to educate the wider public about the Arctic, the sensitivities of the Arctic, the future, I would say, the future in the Arctic as it affects security, as it affects the environment, anything of that nature is good. Arctic360 has now been going for many years and has become a well-recognized advocacy event that really educates people and really hopes to get a buy-in that the overall values that I mentioned in terms of security and the environment and the development of the Indigenous peoples and the protection of their lifestyle becomes more widely accepted by Canadians.
And talked about and
Absolutely.
discussed, and hopefully action follows. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for sitting down and chatting with me. I've taken up enough of your time today. We're so grateful that you were able to join us at this year's conference.
Well, thanks very much. I'm really glad to have been here and look forward to coming back again.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.